This gentleman comes from Fresno, California, Madera, California to be more exact, in Central California. And he's a co-founder of one of the largest, oldest, and most successful freedom law organizations in America, promoting freedom, promoting education, promoting upholding the Constitution by public service and following it. And he's an expert also on the field of the income tax, and his group has helped a lot of people and organizations like Freedom Law School, the paralegals and the staff and the people that they work with were very instrumental in helping Freedom Law School in the mid-90s get going. And he's going to talk about the subject you just heard about more of, and that is the income tax. Please help me give a warm hand of welcome to Mr. Steve Hempfling.
I do. Well, how's everybody in Dallas, Texas? How's the Dallas Cowboys doing? See if we continue to have technical problems. We're going to talk about the income tax. Anybody heard of that? What? What is that? Well, some of you, he told you that's from California. That probably frightens a lot of you. That's the land of fruits and nuts over there. It truly is. We have Arnold Schwarzenegger's our governor over there. In fact, it's very hard to get elected in California unless you're in a movie or something. Yeah. We have several actors in office over there. I guess they need the extra money. Now, I want you to know I'm giving you my opinion today. Payman says I'm an expert, but I'm just not, I'm just not afraid to ask questions of these government people. And so it makes kind of an interesting story. Now, this guy right here, you ever recognize him? He's from your state. He hails from Texas, but he's an illegal immigrant, according to this person up here. Alberto Gonzalez. Anyone remember that name? He was in government a long time ago, a couple weeks ago. And he recently resigned his office as Attorney General. And what I find interesting about it is, the rumors going around, he's committed crimes on a daily basis that would put you and I in jail for life. They'd throw away the key. And now he's on the speaking circuit. If you want him to come and speak at your group for 30 minutes, he'll probably charge you $20,000, $50,000, something like that. Now, that ain't right. Now, the Republicans are not doing anything about Gonzalez, and the Democrats are considering bringing charges against him, and I think that's good. I think Alberto needs to be behind bars. The only problem I'm having is that the Democrats are doing it for the wrong reasons. They're only doing it because he's Republican. If the Republicans had any integrity, which I don't believe they do either, they would be the first to take care of this person and clean their own house. But they don't do it. All they do is cover up. Same with the Democrats. There's supposed to be a sound effect here. Let's try it again. Yeah, who did that? All right, well, that's not working. This is a Harley Davidson motorcycle, for those who don't know. I'm going to give you a little story here real quick before we get going, because it has a moral to this story that's pretty interesting. And the reason I want to talk about this is because, first of all, it has a good moral, but also because I read about this in the Dallas Morning News years ago. And I never forgot this story. This is a story of a person who wanted to buy a motorcycle, and he never rode a motorcycle before in his life. So what he did, I guess money wasn't a problem, because he went out and bought the biggest and most largest expensive motorcycle you could buy, Harley Davidson. And he didn't know how to ride it. Now, I don't know how he got the motorcycle home. But when he got home, he said, "I want to learn to ride in my backyard." So he's riding around his backyard, getting pretty good, he thought. And he wanted to impress his wife, so he was racing toward the back door of the house. And he was going to slam on the brakes right up near the patio door. Well, for some reason, the front wheel of the motorcycle, instead of stopping, it kind of came up off the ground, and he did a wheelie through the glass doors and into the living room. Now, the reason that probably happened, we changing microphones? All right. The reason I think that happened is because the motorcycles have a handbrake, kind of like a bicycle. But right here on the same hand is your throttle. And if you're not careful, when you put the front brake on and roll your hand back, you're going to give it fuel. And a lot of new riders do this. Anyway, he got all cut up, and he's laying there in the living room, and his wife said, "Oh my God." So she runs and gets, calls the ambulance, and they come out and take him away. And her wife is in a big haste and all shook up because she's got to get to the hospital and everything. So what are Harleys just laying on the side now in the living room? What does Harleys do when they lay on the side? They leak. They leak a lot. So there's gasoline all over the living room floor. So she's mopping it all up with towels and stuff and wringing it out in the toilet, and off she goes to the hospital. So the guy, she picks her husband up at the hospital, brings him home, and then he's all bandaged up. He's in the bathroom looking at his bandages and cuts and everything. He's doing some business there at the toilet. Gets a cigarette out. You figured it out. Yes, his wife, in her haste, never did flush the toilet. So he lit the cigarette with a match and threw the match into the toilet. Well, the toilet kind of flamed up and burned this man on many parts of his body, which I won't go any further on. So wife, "Oh my God," so she had to call the ambulance again. Now, Dallas is not a small town. Some of you know that here. But by chance, the same two ambulance drivers came out. Same two ambulance drivers came out. And so they bandaged him up, put him on the stretcher there. But one of the paramedics just couldn't help it. We were just here this morning. They're out in the afternoon again. Says, "Well, we were just here this morning. What happened?" The wife explained the situation. The paramedic carrying the head end of the stretcher laughed so hard he couldn't hang on to the stretcher. It dropped. And then the guy broke his collarbone in the fall. Now that should be in the dictionary under bad day, huh? Well, anyway, I'm going to give you the moral of the story later, but that's what the story is for now. But I do want you to know one thing before some of you feel sorry for me. It wasn't me in the story. Now, this is Citizens Rule Book. You saw it already on some videos. We have a couple different constitutions. I only have the one with the red, white, and blue. This is the rule book. This is the Constitution of the United States. This is why our country became the greatest country the world has ever seen, when we followed this formula in this book. Today, they don't think much about the Constitution. And many of you here, of course, I think you're here because you know that. The Constitution became very important during the presidential election before, didn't it? All of a sudden it became important. But it's not important to the government very much today. In fact, they have a new Constitution written, and we have a copy of it. We're going to publish it if we can when we get to it. But the new Constitution that they want you to adopt, I'm not sure they're actually going to ask you, has no rights whatsoever in it for you. So it should be, I'd like to contrast with our Constitution here. But if you ever play Monopoly or any games like that and never read the rules, and if one player there read the rules and he's telling you what to do all the time, he's going to win. Most likely, unless you know the rules. Now, everybody needs one of these. Now, if you're already out of money, normally they're $2 on the Free Enterprise Society table over there. Other tables probably have them. But if you're out of money already, it's really required that you have one of these. you're going to be searched on the way out. So I'm kidding. But if you run out of money, don't have the $2 for a Constitution, you can go ahead and steal one off the Free Enterprise Society table, because you got to have one. That's that important. It's the most important thing I have on my table. Now, don't take it off other people's table. They might object to that, but on mine, it's okay. No. Justice Hugo Black said loyalty comes from the love of a good government, not fear of a bad one. Is that true today? Do people fear their government in America? They sure do. Thomas Jefferson, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free, they expect something that cannot be. Are we ignorant in this country? No. We're the best educated people in the world, I hear. Not when it comes to government and civics, are we? Thomas Paine said, our duty of the patriot is to protect this country from the government. Can you imagine somebody saying that today? Now, Department of Justice, SEAL.
Just trying to check your audio feed here. Do you have your audio plugged in?
Yeah, I don't have any more sound right now. But it is plugged in. Justice Department. United States Justice Department. Now, it doesn't really say United States anywhere on the seal, so maybe it's on the back. But this gives you a good feeling. If you had a Department of Justice card, I mean, it's the type of thing you want to know about. You want to know that people are getting justice in the system. A lot of Americans, I don't know about a lot, but many Americans think there is justice in our court systems today. But there are many problems. Now, the Department of Justice doesn't really like what I do. And one of their people called me up a few years ago and said, Steve, they're looking at my website. He said, I'm with the Justice Department. He's looking at my website and says, they were doing an investigation on abusive tax shelters. Anyone heard of this? Abusive tax shelter is when you file and get deductions and that kind of thing. As you'll see, you'll probably notice a little way later on that I'm not really involved with that. But anyway, they're looking at my website and they're saying, it doesn't look like you're doing anything that's an abusive tax shelter activity. And I had to agree with the U.S. Justice Department person. But they have since then continued to say, well, some of these statements you're making are false or fraudulent. And I want to bring that to your attention because I want you to be aware the Justice Department says some of the things I say are false and fraudulent. Because what I want you to do is really verify for yourself anyway. Because I want to repeat most of those false and fraudulent things that they said I said today because they're not, in my opinion, not false and fraudulent. Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Who's that, consent of the governed? People in Washington, D.C., or people in this room? People in this room, absolutely, is exactly what the founders intended. But if you talk to the people in Washington, D.C., what do they think? I don't think they do much thinking myself, but... U.S. Constitution. And by the way, this little book has the Declaration of Independence here also. U.S. Constitution, it says, this Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. Does anybody know why this is the supreme law? It's a trick question. Because Article 6 declares it to be. Not because Steve Hempfling said it is. So if this is a supreme law of the land, does that mean it's the top or the bottom? It's supposed to be the top. It says, the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution of laws or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So to Texas, now I'm sure they wouldn't do this, but if Texas legislature were to pass a law contrary to this, what would happen to it? According to this, it would be notwithstanding. It would fail in the face of the Constitution. Every law passed in the state of Texas has to be compared to the United States Constitution. And if it's contrary to that, it is notwithstanding. Now, like I say, Texas certainly would never pass a bill that would be contrary to this, would they? They'd probably do it every day, yes. In California, that's where I'm from, they have 120 elected officials there. 40 senators, 120 assembly. And at the best, this is from the legislators that I know, at the best, only 6 of those 120 people ever read the Constitution. I hope it's better in Texas, but it's not likely. Article 6 continues on. Senators are represented before mentioning the members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. Can we agree they're talking about the United States Constitution? Not the Constitution of Cuba? Does Cuba have a Constitution? Beats me. And if they do we want it? No. I thought you good group here. Now, how important is the Constitution? We have a case here, Norton versus Shelby County. It says an unconstitutional act is not law. It confers no rights. It imposes no duties. It affords no protection. It creates no office. It is in legal contemplation as inoperative as though it has never been passed. Pretty powerful, isn't it? Now, if Texas were to pass an unconstitutional law, would that law be thrown out? It should be, but is it? Not very often. Now let's talk about income tax returns. Is everyone required to file tax returns? That's what I was taught. I mean, before I could walk, and most Americans are probably this way, before they can walk, they know they're required to file income tax returns, don't they? Your parents tell you that, your families tell you this, the schools tell you this. Everybody tells you that you're required to file. So you just kind of take their word for it. But I got to looking, and this is in the 1040 instruction booklet. Some of you may have that. They send it out around Christmas time. You'll get a new one soon. But I found this in there, and you'll find the same thing. It says, do you have to file? Now, if everyone's automatically required to file just by being here, why would they need this box? So let's see what it says. Use chart A, B, and C to see if you must file a return. Okay. Then it has a tip. Even if you do not otherwise have to file a return, you should file one to get a refund. That's a good tip. But it establishes someone's not required, doesn't it? Maybe only one, but at least one person's not required. Maybe everybody else is, but at least one person's not required, or they wouldn't have this in here. Even if you do not otherwise have to file. Let's go to the Constitution. The first 10 amendments are the Bill of Rights, for those who don't know. One of those is the Fifth Amendment. There's been some mention of it on that previous video. The Fifth Amendment involves the filing of income tax returns, and I'm going to show you why. It says, and this is just part of it, no person shall be compelled in any criminal case be a witness against himself. Now, if you watch Perry Mason, you think the Fifth Amendment talks about self-incrimination, but those words do not appear in the Constitution. In fact, self-incrimination doesn't even sound good. You're sitting on the stand, and they ask you a question, well, I don't want to incriminate myself. That's not your right under the Constitution. Under the Constitution, you don't have to testify. You do not have to take a stand and testify against yourself. And that's what the Fifth Amendment talks about. So does that apply to income tax returns? We have a case here, Supreme Court case, that talks about filing of income tax returns and the Fifth Amendment. And here's a quote from it. There can be no question that one who files a return under oath is a witness within the meaning of the amendment. So that's not me saying the Fifth Amendment, that you waive your Fifth Amendment right. That's the courts. So they can use the evidence or information on that tax return just as if you put your hand on the Bible, took an oath, and testified against yourself. You gave them that records. You no longer have a Fifth Amendment claim. Now, when you file an income tax return and something's wrong with it, they can use that against you already. They don't have to get you to admit to it again. And what's interesting, you've heard of tax evasion? Tax evasion is something you might read about in the springtime. But people get charged with that, but that's when you file a return and lie on it. Tax evasion, all it really is a form of perjury. You lied to the government because of this perjury statement that's on the tax return. In fact, it'll say under penalties of perjury when you sign the tax return. Because you see, it also says one who files return under oath. How do you do that? Anybody know? That's right. We're a good group here. Anytime you sign a document under penalties of perjury, it's considered by the courts as being an oath, and they can use that information against you. Not just tax returns, any government form that has that. How about the Fourth Amendment? Is that involved with filing of income tax returns? We have part of it here. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. The founders thought enough of the word papers to put it in the Constitution. What kind of papers are they talking about? Toilet paper? Newspaper? Of course not. It had to be your family records, your business records, personal records of any type were secure, and your houses were secure. Are your houses secure today? Government never crosses your threshold of your home anymore, do they? They do it on a daily basis. They're raiding everyone's home, and they used to never do that. So the question is, can you be required to waive? You waive your Fifth Amendment right, you waive your Fourth Amendment right just to file a tax return. That's before you owe any taxes, if you do. Can you be required to waive a constitutional birthright? Let's look up the definition of waive. If you're going to waive something, it means you abandon, throw away, renounce, repudiate, surrender a claim, privilege, or right to give up a claim or right voluntarily. In order for one to waive a right, he must do it knowingly and be possessed of the facts. Did the IRS tell you clearly that you were waiving these birthrights of yours? They do not. They tell you indirectly, and I'm going to show you that. Now, I want you to notice this is from Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition. A law dictionary is different from Webster's or Funk and Wagnalls that you might use, in that these are used by the courts and each term is defined and there's court cases behind it. Like in this one, there's Barnhill versus Rubin, which is a case they use on the definition. And that's important. For a lot of terms, they're similar, but some terms in a law dictionary are a lot different than what you're normally used to. Now, they talk about rights all the time. Congress does. They have statutory rights. Anyone heard of those? What is a statutory right? Written into law by the legislature, some kind of statute. Now, what can they do with that? Is that a real right? The legislators can repeal that statutory right the next day, can't they? Now, civil rights, ever heard of that? Civil rights, a lot of that was actually won in the courtroom. They kind of codified it into law now, but a lot of that was done with Martin Luther King and others, just going into the courts over and over again. And they gained rights through the courts, supposedly. Now, if a court gives you a right, what can happen the next day? Next decision can take it away, you bet. I like to talk about, and Congress, they always talk about taxpayer rights in the springtime. What's that? Beats me, I never did figure that out. Constitutional right is what I like to talk about. We got a definition here. A right guaranteed to the citizens by the Constitution and so guaranteed as to prevent legislative interference therewith. Can they require you to waive these rights in order to do something else? No. Well, how are they getting away with this? You've seen this already on some of the films. Is the income tax voluntary? Sounds totally ridiculous, doesn't it? But I've got another Supreme Court case here. Right here. It says our tax system is based upon voluntary assessment and payment, not upon distraint. Distraint means force. Maybe the IRS has not read this case. The California Franchise Tax Board, we'll skip that because we're not in California. Now, I went to a meeting like this in 1979, and the person talking was talking about voluntary, and I thought it was a little crazy. I thought, these lights weren't really on upstairs. Anyway, he said, Steve, you should call the IRS up and ask them. And I'm not recommending this to you. I'm just telling you my story. This was in 1979. And by God, I did. The next morning, I called the IRS up. And I talked to an agent there, and I said, is the income tax voluntary? And the agent said, yes, sir, it is. Well, that surprised me. That was not the answer I expected. But then I paused for a moment. I said, well, good. I don't want to volunteer anymore. And then the agent said something pretty interesting to me. The agent said, but, sir, you have to volunteer. Well, that confused me, and I had to hang up the phone at that point. But we need definitions. Maybe voluntary does mean mandatory. I thought, well, we have to look up the definition. This is a really neat one from the IRS website itself. And by the way, when I say it's voluntary, this is one of the terms, this is one of the things that the Justice Department says I'm saying is fraudulent. And it's not me saying it. I get this. This is right from the IRS website glossary, voluntary compliance. A system of compliance that relies on its individual citizens to report their income freely and voluntarily, calculate their tax correctly, and file a tax return on time. We also have a Special Agent's Handbook. Now, Special Agents Handbook is carried by special agents. They're the Criminal Investigation Division. They're the ones with the badges and the guns. And when this was sent out, and it was a former commissioner, Mortimer Kaplan, this is a note he sent to the agents. He said, agents, our tax system is based upon individual self-assessment and voluntary compliance. The material in this handbook is confidential in character and must not under any circumstance be made available to persons outside this service. That's important stuff. Now you notice it's confidential, so now that you read it, you have to forget it. Now I bring that to your attention because when we get secret manuals supplied to us by secret sources, we publish them. So there's a lot of these, all these on our table over there, the Special Agents Handbook. Here's another definition, Funk and Wagnalls. Proceeding from the will is one's own free choice. Voluntary system, a system of freely given support. And here's a good one from a law dictionary. Unconstrained by interference, unimpelled by another's influence, spontaneous, acting of oneself, proceeding from the free and unrestrained will of the person. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, on April 15th, 90 million Americans, free and unrestrained, go down to the post office and file their income tax returns. That's silly. How does the IRS collect taxes today? Fear and intimidation. Would terrorism count? Do they terrorize Americans? See, there's laws against terrorism, I'm told. Why isn't something done about the IRS? Now, I said that the IRS tells you indirectly that you're waiving rights, and they do. They're required to do so under law. And you'll find this in the 1040 instruction booklet also. It's called Disclosure Privacy Act and Paperwork Reduction Act Notice. Now, this used to be right on page 2 where everybody could see it, but nobody read it. Now, when we started actually reading it and talking about it, they started moving it farther and farther back in the book. In fact, it was very hard to find this, page 75. Now, for most people, when you come across this page, even if you'd ever happened to open it to that page, you probably did not bother to read it. It doesn't sound very interesting. But this is very important. The Privacy Act, I'll tell you, I got some paragraphs marked. Those are my markings, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's blow those up. Number 1, kind of in the middle there. The Paperwork Reduction Act of 1980 required that when we ask you for information, we must first tell you our legal right to ask for the information, why we're asking for it, how it will be used. We must also tell you what could happen to you if we do not receive it, whether your response is voluntary, required to obtain a benefit, or mandatory under the law. Congress passed this in 1973 or 74. Now, I'm interested in what their legal right to ask for information is, so let's go to that section. Our legal right to ask for information is Internal Revenue Code section 6001, 6011, and 6012A and their regulations. They say you must file a return or statement for any tax you're liable for. Your response is mandatory under these sections. It sounds like you're required, doesn't it? But does it say that? It doesn't. It says these 3 sections say that. Doesn't it? Kind of misleading. Maybe we should look at those 3 sections before we make up our mind. What do you think? All right, conveniently, I have them on the screen here for you. 6011 from the Internal Revenue Code. Every person liable for any tax imposed by this title. Let's stop right there and look at the first 3 words. Every person liable. Does that make you liable for a tax if that's the way it starts off? This would apply to you. Would you agree that this would apply to you after you've been made liable? Once you know you're liable, you would look at this section. It must be 6011. Yes. Oh, the general rule. This is it. When required by regulation, let's look at those first 2 words. When required. Does that require you to do something? Would it be fair to say this would only apply to you when you're required and you know you're required, you better read this section? So this must not be it. It must be the next section. 6012A. General rule. This is it. This is a little harder to understand, but I think you'll get it. Returns with respect to income taxes under subtitle A shall be made by the following. Every individual having for a taxable year a gross income which equals or exceeds the exemption amount, except the return shall not be required of an individual. Now, you may think I'm taking this out of context, but there are some codes here, and that's just the way it's written. It's got the big dash, and then there's a little I, and they list a whole bunch of people not required. I and little 2I, and I don't have the whole section in here. But I guess if you're not on that list of not required, so you're supposed to feel that you're required. Is that the way law works? It does not. I want to come back to this section here. Your response is mandatory under these sections. What response? Those sections didn't make you mandatory for anything that I can find. In fact, what I find interesting, when you find the word liable or required, it usually says it's preceded by the word when or not required. And the deeper you get, the more it comes clear to you. Now, if you are filing returns, that's okay. A lot of members and people do. But I want you to know that your information is held confidential. A lot of people are very concerned about their financial security, aren't you? Because they can take your identity. Well, the IRS keeps your, on penalty of death, they'll keep your information safe. So in the middle, we'll show you right here. It says, for example, we may disclose your tax information to the Department of Justice to enforce the tax laws, both civil and criminal, to cities, states, District of Columbia, U.S. Commonwealths, or possessions, and certain foreign governments. Who's left out? You are. Now, if you want to get your own tax records, the IRS will probably deny it. And you're going to have to possibly sue under the Freedom of Information Act to get some of your own records. But everybody else can pretty much have it, just so you know. Now, Section 4 says, please keep this notice with your records. It may help you if we ask you for additional information. I think that's true, because I actually went into the IRS. After I made that phone call, here's what I did. Sometime later, a month or a week or so, I don't know exactly when. But it was getting close to tax time, and I still didn't know what I was going to do about income taxes. So I decided to walk into the IRS building, unannounced. And I walked up to the desk there. There's somebody in the front of the building. I don't recommend this at all, but this is what I did. I walked into the IRS, and I walked up to the set. I said, listen, I've been to a meeting that said I'm not required to file, and I'm thinking about that, and I wanted to talk to your people first, or something like that. Yeah. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, am I? Anyway, well, they were very accommodating at that time, and they gave me 2 agents and put me in this little room there. And I let them talk first, and I said the same thing. I said, I've been to this meeting. I want to see what you guys had to say. And so they said, okay, we got something to say. And they said, well, it's a great honor to be an American and pay your fair share. And that's all they had for me, basically. So then I had my briefcase with me, and I had their 1040 instruction booklet, and I even had an Internal Revenue Code. And I kind of went through with these 2 agents what I did with you just now. And I had both those agents, they were scratching their head. They say, well, Mr. Hempling, I can see why you have a question about this. But then they decided that my code was wrong. My Internal Revenue Code. It's old, or, I don't know what exactly they meant by that. It's like, I didn't really print one up special for them. But anyway, they left and said, we're going to get our own Internal Revenue Code. I said, okay, great. So off they run. They left me there alone for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I was getting a little worried. 40 minutes. That's a near eternity in the IRS building. Anyway, they finally come back about 40 minutes later, and they said, well, they kind of sheepishly said, well, we can't find our IRS code. The way they said it made me believe that there's only one in this building, and it was lost. And I was in the main IRS building for San Jose, Gish Road. It was their main computer center at the time. Huge place. Thousands of agents. One code. Lost. See, a lot of you think that every agent's issued a code, and they take it with them, and they sleep with it, and take it with them everywhere they go on the amusement park rides or whatever. They've got to read that thing. But it was very apparent to me that these 2 agents had never seen the Internal Revenue Code before in their life. Neither had they ever looked at the Privacy Act before in their life. And we go back to this Privacy Act, page 75, this name. Disclosure Privacy Act and Paperwork Reduction Act notice always confused me. What a crazy name. What kind of name do these people come up with? But I finally figured it out. I said, well, gee, if more people did stop on page 75 and actually read the Privacy Act, a lot more people would stop filing income tax returns, and there would be a big paperwork reduction. All right. Well, who is required to file returns? So you're a pretty good group. I got kind of a dry sense of humor. Not everybody gets me, but you guys are going all right. Who is required? In the Internal Revenue Code, there are a few requirements actually in there. Now, the way the law works, they have to create a liability on some group, and clearly defined group, and then once the liability is created, they can impose a tax on that. So Section 5703 is one of those liabilities we did find. Liability for tax imposed and method of payment. And then the manufacturer or importer of tobacco products. Anybody manufacture or import tobacco products?
We all do.
Yeah, right. If you do that, there is a tax, and you'll see on the cigarettes there's a stamp tax that is paid. That's a federal stamp tax created by this section. And the tax is imposed, it even gives you the section right here, 5701. The imposition of the tax from that section is right here. It's on cigars manufactured in or imported in the United States. It goes through all the sections and what the rates of tax are on each type of tobacco. Another one we found is 5005, persons liable for tax. This sounds a little closer, but then it goes on. The distiller or importer of distilled spirits shall be liable for taxes thereon by section 5001A1. Again, it gives us a section where the tax is imposed. In general, there's hereby imposed on all distilled spirits produced or imported in the United States a rate of $13.50 a proof gallon, and it goes on from there. Now, this is it was tobacco, alcohol, and there's one more for firearms. That sound ring a bell? Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. God, that sounds familiar. I don't have the one here for firearms, but the next section is going to, I do have the section that requires the individual. That's going to come up here next. Again, the missing sound effect. There it is. That's the section we found that requires every individual to file. I know we can search by computer these days, and we just can't find it. Now, there is a curious section we're going to talk about, though. Who's required? Credit liability on the average working person in this country? I don't believe it exists. The government won't give it to us. We've asked them for it. We've asked the courts for it, and no one answers our question. We did find this section. It says imposition of a tax. In fact, some accountants and tax attorneys have said, well, this requires you. Section 1, right of the code, it says tax imposed. Married individuals filing jointly, and it goes through a whole bunch of stuff. But the problem is an imposition of tax by itself without knowing you're liable doesn't cut it. There has to be a liability created on you that you understand and clearly understand, and then if that's true, there would be a section pointing to Section 1 like the ones we went through, and there isn't any that we can find. And anyway, if Section 1 did require you to do something, it would be required to be in the Privacy Act that the IRS publishes. So why wouldn't they put it there? Why would tax attorneys and accountants go out of their way to help prove that you're required, even though the IRS doesn't use that section? It's interesting. Senator Root, he was around when the first income tax was passed, and here's a comment he had to say about it I think you'll find interesting. He says, I guess you will have to go to jail if that is a result of not understanding the income tax law. I shall meet you there. We shall have a merry, merry time, for all of our friends will be there. It will be an intellectual center, for no one understands the income tax law except persons who do not have sufficient intelligence to understand the questions that arise under it. Mark Twain, well-known writer. Irreverence is the champion of liberty. It's our only defender. But yet today, if you speak out against government, you're attacked. And people are even afraid to do it. People have been visited by Homeland Security for talking about issues, government issues in restaurants and stuff. People report them. I don't know if they happen in Texas. It's happening in California. It's happening other places. And that is absolutely un-American. Now we have I'm taking some of this today off our income tax basics seminar, which is on our table. And there's a lot more on there if you want to pick that up. They're normally $15. We have DVD or CD sets. We also have a complete set of 15 other seminars, which are more advanced seminars. These are on MP3 format that you might want to pick up. We also have a 6-hour class similar to one that was done yesterday by David Wellington and Sean O'Connor. We just did this a month ago in Sacramento, California. And that's our most advanced class that we have. Now, Free Enterprise Society has a membership. It's Got an official membership card. It's good for a year. You get to attend regular society meetings. We don't really do regular meetings in Texas here, but you also get some discounts on meetings that we have. FES newsletter we do right now 6 times a year, talking about the subjects that we're doing, the cases we're involved with, some of the new research. FES handbook tells you all of our services and benefits. Eligible for optional programs, which I'll discuss. Also, FES verified ID card available, which I'll show you that too. And knowledge that you're supporting America. One of the things we try to do is get people involved with the Constitution. The schools don't teach us any longer, so we're trying to do it. We're on the radio and television as often as possible. Television, not so much. Now, ABC did do a special on me last year. No, it was the year. Yeah, it was last year at our convention. They come in undercover. Now, the interesting thing about it, they have the, it wasn't all that bad, except that they, coming in undercover acted like I wasn't going to let them in, which wasn't true. In fact, they were only there because I had invited them. But they came in undercover and tried to make us look like we're getting away with something, which we weren't. But that's the way they paint things in the media. And I've also been interviewed, and then if they don't like what I say, here's what they do. They put you up in the little picture in the right corner. You've seen this happen. And then the news person tells you what I'm saying. They only do that when I'm not saying what they said I said. This is $55 a year to be a member. Now, this is the verified ID card. Now, if you get one of these, it'll have a different picture on it. And it would be a little smaller. It would fit in your pocket. In 1999, I got picked up by the police or sheriff's department, and I don't really carry a driver's license. Now, that's a whole other seminar for those that don't understand it. But I do carry ID, and I had an ID with me, but it wasn't government issued. I don't want the government to do anything for me. Not the way I feel about it anymore, but so the sheriff's deputy, he's looking at my ID, and he didn't like it. He said, "I don't like this." So he arrested me, and he arrested my car. I mean, you get the attitude they're mad at the car because it would dare let me get in without a license. I don't know. But they took me down and they arrested me, and they towed the car, and I got it all back, and they gave me a ticket for not having a driver's license. I said, all right. So we went into court, and I got most of that thrown out. I got the driver's license and everything thrown out finally by fighting in the courts. But we also did something else. We took the owner of the vehicle, which wasn't mine, sued the tow truck company, which later, they didn't win the lawsuit, but the tow truck company went out of business over the lawsuit, who towed for the sheriff's department. And every other tow truck company in that county certainly heard about it. And they were more careful when towing vehicles for the sheriff's department or the police department on the driver's license issue. It's big money to them because they share. When they tow, they get a percentage, and the police department that tows get a percentage. It's like cops on commission. That's very dangerous. Well, anyway, and then since I was arrested, I sued the sheriff's department, the deputy, and the county. And I didn't win that suit either. It actually we kind of ran out of time limits and ran out of time, but I did. I don't think that deputy will pick me up again because we put him through several days of depositions, a couple trials, and on the ticket. We kept him off the street for a long time, which was one of my goals. But I was real nice to him too. Thing is, they're not really our enemies. At the sheriff deputy level, I'm trying to get them as allies. So I was always real friendly with him. Even at the traffic court, I'd try to shake his hand, see how he's doing and how his family's doing. At first, he was kind of standoffish, wasn't getting involved with that. But after a while, he got used to that, and he'd even run over and shake my hand when we started meeting at depositions and stuff. Because he knew it wasn't personal. I gave him the Constitution. I said, well, you did take an oath for this. You ought to read it maybe sometime. And I gave him one of those. And I bought him a subscription to a couple other magazines and stuff, He kind of liked me after that a little better, but I don't think he'd pick me up again. But anyway, I'm getting off point here. The reason I tell you that story is because the ID that I took into court at that time, I wasn't real confident in. We made some homemade IDs. So what we decided to do is make a free enterprise society verified member identification, which is different from our membership card. Because you, in order to get this, you have to supply us similar information that you might supply to the state to get a driver's license. And we want to verify this, and we want to be able to testify on your behalf in court that this is a proper ID. It's not something to use for made-up names and that kind of thing. Because what I want to do the next time if I have that opportunity, because I believe this ID will win in the federal district, maybe not in the lower court, but probably in the appellate courts all around the country. Now, there is a case here, People versus Monroe, and there's other cases like it. This is California, but it does apply in any of the states because of the reciprocation agreements that each state has. But it says, an officer must accept it as satisfactory, talking about an ID this person had that was not government issued. And we took that case and the information in there, and we created this ID that I showed you, and it is better by far than what Monroe had. And we did that intentionally. Another thing we're trying to do with this is get it grandfathered in. We put this program together in 2001, and it was done before the national ID, which is supposed to go in next year. And we hope that ours will be we're hoping to get it grandfathered in the courts, because our ID existed before this national ID that they're putting together. So we're going to try to combat the national ID with a private national ID. Now you're probably asking, does this work? In California, they're really notorious about arresting people when they don't, because it's money. And they're told to do it, and the officers aren't given a lot of discretion. But now so far, with this ID, some people have had problems with airplanes and stuff. That's not really why we developed it. But with police officers, what I find interesting, we had a few people picked up with this ID with the police officers, and at this point, they did not arrest the individuals. So I say it's working. The officer will tell the guy this is a worthless ID, but he gives it back to them and does not arrest them. He wouldn't do that if he thought it was totally worthless. In fact, normally what they do is keep the ID and arrest you and use it as evidence saying this is a false ID or something like that, or try to do it, and they can't win that case. We also recommend the officer contact the district attorney or city attorney. And we also have our phone number on there, and we'll verify your identity as well. Now, right now, this is a manual system, but if we get enough interest in this, we'll probably have a 24-hour automated system that the officers can call, even if you're picked up at 3 a.m. at that stupid red light that never turns green, whatever. So that's what that's about. I don't even know if I have any applications here for that. I'll look for that, but there are on our website. We have a support service. If you're not filing income tax returns, now we don't push you to do one thing or the other, but there's a lot of people that really get fed up with the tax system, and they just can't really want to continue to support it anymore. If you're in that way, in that position now, or thinking about it, we have a support service, because if you don't file returns, does the IRS say, okay, sorry to bother you, we won't bother you anymore, or anything like that? They don't do that. They do take you off their mailing list, though. After it was probably just a year, after 1 year of not filing, the next year they did not send my book to me in the mail. I had to go down to the post office to see what they're doing this year, or whatever. So it's really highly inconvenient. But anyway, this helps you help yourself dealing with IRS and Franchise Tax Board correspondence. Well, Franchise Tax Board California. You have a state income tax here in Texas. We would work on that as well. So they would send you a letter, for example, well, we don't have a record receiving your tax return. Initial consultations by appointment, state-of-the-art research tools. We can research other issues for you if you have any problem with any other government agencies, city or county. There was some questions yesterday about other city ordinances and people taking vehicles off of properties and that kind of thing. We can research some of that for you. We have researched all the codes in all the states electronically available to us. This way we can help with other agencies other than tax agencies. We have paralegal assistance and attorney referrals. A charge only when you use the service. And that's $60 a year to be a member, then it's a fee per service basis if we do anything for you. We also deal with traffic issues right now, mostly in California, but I hope to expand it, or if we get some people knowledgeable in Texas, for example, we would maybe work through a Texas group to send our members to them if anybody's working on traffic rights here. Helps you with DMV problems, assistance in answering speeding tickets, parking tickets, no driver's license tickets, no registration, and others. Again, it's only a charge when you use the service, and it's included in the support service automatically. Legal defense fund. This is a pretty important one if you're not filing. You really need to consider assistance if you are charged with failure to file income tax returns, which is something they still charge people with. And this is the big problem because it's expensive to defend yourself. And these cases can be defended. They can be defended successfully. We can't guarantee always 100% success, but we've won quite a few of them, and I'll show you a few of those here too. Assistance if you're charged with submitting a false or fraudulent W-4 statement. Pays for an attorney when needed. So if you go to trial, we actually pay for the attorney. We have paralegals that help write the motions and design the strategy for you. If an attorney is needed in the case, we'll bring it in. And I say if, because not because we want you to be your own attorney, but sometimes we'll get the cases dismissed before we even go to trial because of other errors or problems that the government's complaint has. In one case, we eliminated, I remember one IRS case, I think it was IRS or maybe California, but we were whittling away at the complaint. It had 4 or 5 charges on there, and we got 2 dismissed, and we got another one dismissed, and then we got 2 more dismissed. And by that time, there wasn't anything left on the complaint, and the government didn't figure it out. They were still planning for trial. Another thing here, this supports those members who are in the courts. Hopefully none of you in here will ever need the legal defense fund, but it does go. By working together, we can develop enough money to make these cases successful. Because I had one person in my office that say he spent $70,000 on the lower court trial and lost it. That did not include the cost of appeals. And that's pretty intimidating. For most people, they have to plead guilty just because they really can't defend it, even if they feel they're in the right position. So we have a lot of members, a lot of people who are members of the Legal Defense Fund who are filing returns. We have other people supporting it who are not necessarily members, but they support it with donations or some kind of form where we can set up monthly payments, a monthly donation that you may want to give, because this is very important. Because we can stop a lot of things that are going on today if we can have the money to defend it properly. Unfortunately, today, if you don't have the money, you lose. But together, we do have the money, because they can't attack very many people. They like to think you can, but they attack very few people. I mean, in the criminal courts anyway. This is $1,250 an initial fee to be a member, and then it's $540 a year or $50 a month. If you know anything about legal costs, you know how cheap that is. Give you a couple case strategies in California. Gene Lamson and Phil D. overturned on appeal for counsel issue. In California, you have a right to counsel, and in most other states too, I'm sure. But in this case, these 3 cases, we went a step further. We believe you have a right to competent counsel. Is there a difference? We kept looking for an attorney, and there were attorneys who wouldn't take the case, but the attorneys say, well, you know you're required to file and pay. Well, they're not competent to handle the case. Or they'd say something like, well, you know you're going to lose or whatever. Or they charged too much, whatever it was. We kept saying we couldn't get this counsel. And we kept going back to the judge and say, well, we can't find counsel. That's, competent. And the judge finally got mad at him, sent him through trial without counsel, and that's an automatic reversal in California. So the 3 cases overturned right there. Bruce Anderson, acquitted on all counts. This was a proven negative. This was also a California case, but it can apply to federal. The government, one thing that patriots sometimes do is they'll tell the IRS, hey, I didn't file and I'm proud of it. And that's okay, but that's part of the prosecution's case. That's really 80% of the prosecution's case. They have to prove you did not file. Now, if you don't tell them that, how can they prove it? Anybody know? Well, they bring on a computer expert. Oh, I searched the computer and there was no return shown on the computer. Well, did that prove you didn't file? Well, maybe I mailed the return and maybe you didn't get it. Could they say that did not happen? They can say, yes, that could have happened. Maybe you received it and lost it. Can they say that did not happen? Maybe you received it and flushed it down the toilet accidentally. Can they say that didn't happen? We know they do that, right, for their quotas? We've even heard reports of them shredding thousands of returns because they're behind in administration. Could that have happened? Yes. On and on and on we go. There was hundreds of reasons why they couldn't prove it unless you admit it. And that puts the government in a position of proving a negative. If there's any scientist out there, that's a virtual impossibility. Robert Pierce in Michigan had all IRS counts dismissed because of speedy trial. They got 70 days to get you to trial. If you don't waive time, it's game over. They set trial date after 70 days. We wait for day 71. We put in the motion, and it's over. Now, some of you are thinking right now that these aren't the issues we want to get heard. We want to get the constitutional questions heard. Well, I do too, but you're not going to get it done at the lower court level, number one. And if your name's on this complaint, you'll be one happy camper when that thing's dismissed. Brad Lager, another IRS case. This is a very interesting one. We got it dismissed because the IRS agent and the U.S. attorney lied to the grand jury to get the indictment in the first place. One of the questions the grand jury asked, because they were talking about willfulness, willful failure to file means bad intent. It's not just failure to file. They have to prove that in your mind you knew you were committing a crime when you did not file. See? So willful. So the grand jury asked the U.S. attorney, asked the IRS agent, special agent, what is willful? And the agent said, well, it wouldn't be willful if the person were unconscious. And the U.S. attorney agreed. And that's a lie. That is absolutely a lie. You have to consciously to be willful, you've got to intend to do something, not be unconscious. And the judge, when he found that out in the grand jury transcripts, threw it out. We have a total of 25 victories on probably 12 different issues, because the government fails every way that we look at it. And the other way we've succeeded in this is through the Legal Defense Fund and the help of all the members of that. So I hope that's something you consider. The Legal Defense Fund is extremely important. Abraham Lincoln, to sin by signs when they should protest makes cowards of men. Is that true today? Are Americans cowards? A lot of them are, because we should be in the football stadium right over here where the Dallas Cowboys play with a meeting like this. Now, there may be some people that don't think I'm politically correct at this point, and you would be correct. So I'm going to talk about Joan of Arc just for a minute, because he's going to... Well, because I talk to pastors, and I'm the members of my church, and the priests and different things, and I keep coming across this thing about, well, God puts the leaders there, and God will take care of all these things, and I really have a problem with that. If the founders had this attitude, we'd still be England, because they'd be sitting over there with their feet up, waiting for God to create America. Now, Joan of Arc is a fascinating story for those that have never read it. Arguably, she was the most influential woman ever in our history. At age 17, she led the world's largest army ever in existence in the uprising in France. And it's just an amazing story. It gives me chills even just thinking about it. And then in 19, she was captured and then executed. And did that stop what was happening in France? No. The strength doubled after they killed her. But one thing that Joan of Arc said, and I always remember this, when we move, God will move. When I left the corporations in 1982, everybody was taking bets on when I'd be back. And I haven't been back, because I decided this is what I'm going to do until we're done. If everybody quit their job, we'd be done in a couple of days. But, of course, that ain't going to happen. Now, today, if you want to join this weekend, you can do so for $45 instead of $55. I need to have the application. Don't need the money. I know you're going to have all these tables and stuff, and I do the same thing, run around and spend all my money at these darn tables because they have so much good stuff. But you can give us the application, and the promise for $45, we'll accept that. Support service is $60. On the lifetime membership's normally $1,200, and we can do that for $1,100. If you have more questions, I'll be here for that. They're about to send the cane out here for me, I guess. Legal Defense Fund is $1,250, not annual, but that's an initial fee, and then it's $50 or more a month, $50 a month or $540 a year. On this weekend, we're going to do a $200 special. And again, we don't need the money. You give me an application, we're going to knock off $200 for you. And you can make payments, like nothing down, and make payments for this Legal Defense Fund. If you're a non-filer, you really should consider being a member of that. If you like what our Legal Defense Fund's doing, even if you're filing and want to support it, we can work out something, whatever works for you. Because the people doing that are willing to risk everything, including their liberty, to stand up for what's in this Constitution. Many of the people that we're defending, many of the people in here have the same blood running through their veins that the founders that signed the Declaration of Independence. And they had the same troubles we're having in getting people educated. Moral of the story, quickly. This person, even though I think he's got good taste in motorcycles, made a poor decision. If you don't know how to ride, you don't start off with the biggest and the most powerful thing on the planet. You should have learned how to ride on a smaller motorcycle, one that he could manhandle that didn't manhandle him, one that the front brake would would stall the engine instead of take it off the ground. So I just think he made a poor decision. We want you, and I don't want you to come to me or not file or cause a problem for yourself and your family without being informed and making an informed decision. Because I want you to prove me wrong. I want you to study the information. If you agree with what we're doing, I want you to consider supporting us. But that's the moral of this story, is make informed decisions. I'm not trying to get anybody to do anything that they're going to regret. And one other important thing, this only covers the beginning. You must do your own study, come to your own conclusions. I've given you some of my opinions. And it's important that you do your own research and opinions. And if you're watching on the web or on the DVD, you can get the catalog. I'll send you the free catalog at freeenterprisesociety.com or 209-966-7040. And we have Truth Attack up here. This is Tommy Cryer's. It's a coalition of groups now. Free Enterprise Society is involved with that, along with Tommy Cryer, Freedom Law School, Save a Patriots. There's lots of groups going to be involved with that, a new coalition of tax groups around the country to make a more unified front and a more unified attack. I think that'll be very, very fantastic. And you can all get involved with Truth Attack at all different levels at your local level. There's going to be things going on in this community that Truth Attack will have on their website. We have a sign-up list that'll give you a free newsletter. If you're not a member, at least sign up on our mailing list, and we'll keep you informed of different things. We have a free catalog. There's what it looks like the free catalog. Make sure you pick one of those up. And freedom is not free. I hope you consider supporting our organization financially, because we do reach out and reach more people, and it takes money to do that. A lot of people think we make a lot of money. We don't. This meeting, for example, I want to thank Freedom Law School for inviting me here. These were a lot of work, and they spend tens of thousands of dollars just on printing and postage to get these things done. People don't realize that. They think they get rich, and it's rare they even make money on these type of events. But it's important to do, and Payman's willing to do it, and I do conventions sometimes, and other people have done some sacrifice. So I really appreciate your time, and I hope to meet all of you that I haven't met here, and I feel like I'm among friends. And I really enjoy this because I feel normal for a few days. Because I'm not unlike most of you. When I go home, people think I'm half nuts. And so thank you very much for your time. We'll talk to you later.